Friends, fellow humans, fellow compatriots from across the planet, I'm Nikhil Parekh. In this video, I shall be giving you a recitation of my poem titled Longest Poem Written by Nikhil Parekh, Only as Life. So here is the recitation of my poem about the poetry book. Longest poem written by me contains a Herculean 7389 words. 46,257 characters, composed in my inimitable style and with stupendous intensity all throughout. The poem is a royal treatise to the chapters of the English language and is the first of its kind, evolved in pure poetic verse till the end. Unlike many of its contemporaries, the verses within are humble salutations to the boundless chapters of life and love, and are a reflection of my brain, bizarrely stretched to the most unprecedented limits. Now available in the form of a book, this singular poem is one of the most outstanding example of thousands of similes encompassed under one roof and delivered to optimum effect. The poem continues to be unparalleled in its length and one of the most unflailingly distinctive of its kind in the universal English poetic fraternity. This book aims at eventually arriving at the veritable meaning of the chapter called life, interweaving through countless elements and analogies offered by the boundless creations of God. Interweaving through countless elements and analogies offered by the boundless creations of God, unfolding each instant around us. So here is a recitation of this poem of mine. Every star in the wonderfully resplendent cosmos may or may not enthrallingly shine, and everything on this universe that flamboyantly shines could not be irrefutably termed only as a star, Every flower sprouting from fathomless kilometers of land may or may not diffuse rhapsodic fragrance, and everything on this universe that is seductively fragrant could not be irrefutably termed only as a flower. Every cloud in the voluptuously crimson sky may or may not pelt tantalizing droplets of golden rain, and everything on this universe that is enigmatically misty could not be irrefutably termed only as a cloud. Every tree on bountifully fertile land may or may not blossom into an astounding flurry of succulent fruit, And everything on this universe that spawns and everything on this universe that spawns into countless of its kind could not be irrefutably termed only as a tree. Every battlefield on vindictively belligerent mud may or may not metamorphose into the ultimate victory of mankind. And everything on this universe that massacres and indiscriminately sucks blood could not be refutably termed only as a battlefield. Every clock that incessantly functions for centuries immemorial may or may not transit you into incredulously ravishing waves of untamed nostalgia. Untamed nostalgia. And everything on this universe that monotonously ticks could not be irrefutably termed only as a clock. Every lion philandering rampantly through the profusely robust jungles. Every lion philandering rampantly through the profusely robust jungles may or may not be a man-eater. And everything on this universe that was vociferously ferocious could not be refutably termed only as a lion. Only as a lion. Every hive sandwiched amidst the magnificently royal foliage may or may not be boisterously buzzing. And everything on this universe that was melodiously chattering and sweet could not be refutably termed as only a hive. As only a hive. Every eye majestically embossed in the sockets. Every eye majestically embossed in the sockets of the charismatically alluring face may or may not be emphatic. And everything on this universe with poignantly gushing tears could not be refutably termed only as an eye. Only as an eye. Every salubrious coconut suspended from the branches may or may not harbor ingratiatingly sweet water in its belly. And everything on this universe that was obdurately hard. And everything on this universe that was obdurately hard could not be refutably termed only as a coconut. Only as a coconut. Every dungeon, countless kilometers beneath soil, may or may not harbor an unfathomable conglomerate of snakes. May or may not harbor an unfathomable conglomerate of snakes. Every dungeon, countless kilometers beneath soil, may or may not harbor an unfathomable conglomerate of snakes. And everything on this universe as dark as the costly night could not be refutably termed only as a dungeon. Only as a dungeon. Every stream voluptuously cascading through the mountains may or may not be culminating into ecstatic froth. and every bit of water wandering freely on this universe could not be refutably termed only as I stream. Every song captivatingly floating through the surreally mesmerizing atmosphere may or may not convey the message profoundly imbibed within. May or may not convey the message profoundly imbibed within. And every voice that emanated on this universe could not be refutably termed only as a song. Only as a song. Every thorn, every thorn surreptitiously creeping from nimble covers of soil may or may not acrimoniously infiltrate into innocuous skin, and everything on this universe that was piquantly sharp could not be irrefutably termed only as a thorn. Only as a thorn. Every wind exuberantly blowing across the gorgeous valley. Every wind blowing across the gorgeous valley may or may not strike the rocks. May or may not strike the rocks. Every wind exuberantly blowing across the gorgeous valley may or may not strike the rocks, and every draught of euphoric air on this universe could not be refutably termed only as wind. Every chili tangibly extruding from immaculate layers of soil may or may not turbulently sting the tongue. And everything on this universe that was thunderously spicy could not be refutably termed only as chili. Only as chili. Every spider fabulously slithering through its sticky web may or may not inhabit the same for a fathomless lifetimes. And everything on this universe that was intractably sticky, and everything on this universe that was intractably sticky and entangled could not be refutably termed only as a spider. Only as a spider. Every hill rising splendidly above mundane soil may or may not have its summit kissing the absolute zenith of the rosy clouds. Rosy clouds may or may not have its summit kissing the absolute zenith of the rosy clouds. And everything on this universe that was the topmost storied, and everything on this universe that was the topmost storied could not be refutably termed only as a hill. Only as a hill. Every egg left completely solitary by itself may or may not hatch into an immaculately divine fledgling. May or may not hatch into an immaculately divine fledgling. And and everything on this universe that was oval, and everything on this universe that was oval and pearly white, oval and pearly white, could not be refutably termed only as an egg, only as an egg. Every milestone enthusiastically stretching beyond realms of imagination may or may not evoke inscrutable pleasure, and everything on this universe that was delightfully delicious, and everything on this universe that was delightfully delicious could not be irrefutably termed only as a milestone, only as a milestone. Every mark ardently embossed since birth on the body may or may not prove to be astonishingly auspicious, may or may not prove to be astonishingly auspicious, and everything on this universe that was holy, and everything on this universe that was holy and holistic, that was holy and holistic, could not be irrefutably termed only as a mark, only as a mark. Every peacock, every peacock dancing under zealously thundering rain, may or may not make you entirely oblivious to all other activities on earth, and everything on this universe that was iridescently feathered could not be refutably termed only as a peacock, only as a peacock. Every shadow shimmering uncontrollably like a newborn prince, may or may not cast a spell upon your drearily sagging countenance, and everything on this universe that was tranquilly enchanting could not be irrefutably termed only as a shadow, only as a shadow. Every wine bubbling furtively in marvelously crystal glass may or may not intoxicate you beyond sagacious control as you guzzled it down with wild frenzy, and everything on this universe, and everything on this universe that was viciously inebriating could not be irrefutably termed only as wine, only as wine. Every snake, every snake charismatically slithering through the jungles may or may not incarcerate you in an enclosure of unending mysticism, and everything on this universe that was ominously hissing could not be irrefutably termed only as a snake, only as a snake. Every nail agglutinated to the gigantic wall may or may not disdainfully rust as time unfolds. May or may not disdainfully rust as time unfolds. and everything on this universe that was piquantly pointed could not be refutably termed only as a nail, only as a nail. Every slave, heinously lambasted by its dictatorial master. Every slave, heinously lambasted by its dictatorial master, may or may not yield, may or may not yield wholesomely to his commands, may or may not yield wholesomely to his commands, and everything on this universe that was painstakingly persevering under the sun, and everything on this universe that was painstakingly persevering under the sun could not be refutably termed only as a slave, only as a slave. Every joke ridiculously bizarre and funny may or may not invoke pools of unlimited laughter, and everything on this universe that made you smile, could not be refutably termed only as a joke, only as a joke. Every destiny enigmatically encompassed within the palms may or may not lead to the unequivocal gates of prosperity, may or may not lead, may or may not lead to the unequivocal gates of prosperity, and everything on this universe that vacillatingly truant could not be refutably termed only as destiny, could not be refutably termed only as destiny. Every hair that was unsurpassably old, every hair that was unsurpassably old, may or may not be grizzly white in color, and everything on this universe that was insipidly tender follicle, and everything on this universe that was insipidly tender follicle could not be irrefutably termed only as a hair, only as a hair. Every precariously poised knife, every precariously poised knife may or may not barbarically deprive a person of vibrant life, and everything on this universe that was menacingly gleaming could not be refutably termed only as a knife, only as a knife. Every blade of alluringly enchanting grass may or may not buckle capriciously under the violently overwhelming storm, and everything on this universe that was spawning, and everything on this universe that was spawning bountifully from soil could not be refutably termed only as grass, only as grass. Every garland blooming into a festoon of unparalleled chivalry may or may not impart fathomless grandiloquence. Fathomless grandiloquence may or may not impart fathomless grandiloquence, and everything on this universe that was profusely decorated could not be refutably termed only as a garland, only as a garland. Every crocodile hideously writhing in the marshes may or may not pulverize its prey, eloping rapidly, may or may not pulverize its prey, eloping rapidly through the dense bushes, and everything on this universe that was rustically serrated, skinned, could not be refutably termed only as a crocodile, only as a crocodile. Every telephone celestially ringing may or may not bring you to the message you forever desired. And everything on this universe that was vibrantly humming could not be refutably termed only as a telephone, only as a telephone. Every toy, every toy frolicking gregariously in the playful showroom may or may not transit you back to realms of innocuous childhood. And everything on this universe that was innocently bouncing could not be refutably termed only as a child, only as a child. Every bell gloriously ringing in the holy temple, every bell gloriously ringing in the holy temple may or may not bequeath upon you the entire richness of this globe, may or may not bequeath upon you the entire richness of this globe, and everything on this universe that rapped with an enchanting sound could not be refutably termed only as a bell, only as a bell. Only as a bell. Every roof compactly stitched with brazen straw and rubicund brick may or may not sequester you perpetually from the satanically speeding storm. And everything on this universe that imparted transient shelter could not be refutably termed only as a roof, only as a roof. Every dewdrop emphatically radiating as the first rays of dawn kissed blue sky may or may not be pacify the scorching trauma in your throat. And everything on this universe that was fabulously slippery could not be refutably termed only as a dewdrop, only as a dewdrop. Every rope fantastically knotted into boundless folds may or may not catapult you to the ultimate summits of your life. And everything on this universe that was tenaciously curled could not be refutably termed only as a rope, only as a rope. Every pilot exuberantly whistling past the scenery may or may not crash, may or may not crash against the sinister facade of acrid rocks, may or may not crash against the sinister facade of acrid rocks. and everything on this universe that was flying like a rocket could not be refutably termed only as a pilot, only as a pilot. Every crab cunningly crawling on the placidly nestling shores may or may inject its vindictive sting into immaculate flesh, may inject its vindictive sting into immaculate flesh. And everything on this universe that was surreptitiously sauntering could not be refutably termed only as a crab, only as a crab. Every rivulet of crimson blood circulating through countless humans may or may not be philanthropic, and everything on this universe that was ardently red, could not be refutably termed only as blood, could not be refutably termed only as blood. Every embellished king seated on the scintillating throne, may or may not be a dispenser of celestial justice. And everything on this universe which was unequivocally princely could not be refutably termed only as king, only as king. Every earthquake, every earthquake devastating to the most horrifically abominable core may or may not swipe civilizations, may or may not swipe civilizations in its uncouthly treacherous swirl. And everything on this universe, and everything on this universe which was resonating cataclysmically, could not be refutably termed only as an earthquake. And everything on this universe, which was resonating cataclysmically, could not be refutably termed only as an earthquake. Every ocean ebulliently undulating under milky beams of moonlight, may or may not drown ships in its savage bottom. And everything on this universe that was mischievously salty could not be refutably termed only as an ocean, only as ocean. Every opulently inspiring piano, when delectably strung, may or may not strike an intimate chord, may or may not strike an intimate chord with hearts obliviously strewn around. And everything on this universe that rhythmically rose and fell in a titillating cadence could not be refutably termed only as piano, only as piano. Every ingenious idea blossoming in the brain, every ingenious idea blossoming in the brain may or may not lead to the pinnacle of astronomically irrevocable success. and everything on this universe that intransigently dreamt could not be refutably termed only as an idea. Every philanthropist incorporating the mission, every philanthropist incorporating the mission to save humanity in his soul may or may not reach the most despicably shivering quarters of this colossal planet, may or may not reach the most despicably shivering quarters of this colossal planet, and everything on this universe that was supremely chivalrous could not be refutably termed only as a philanthropist. Only as a philanthropist. Every story, every story deluged with overwhelming romance, deluged with overwhelming romance and enigma, may or may not, may or may not evoke the intrinsic catharsis of the persona, and everything on this universe that was an incredulous adventure could not be refutably termed only as a story. Only as a story. Every wink, every wink, flirtatiously executed, flirtatiously executed. Every wink, flirtatiously executed, may or may not lead lovers to the bridge of clandestine absconding, and everything on this universe which was even the slightest closure of the eye could not be refutably termed only as a wink, and everything on this universe which was even the slightest closure of the eye could not be refutably termed only as a wink, only as a wink. Every woman vividly enamoring may or may not trigger infernos of raw desire through lackadaisical ingredients of insipid blood, and everything on this universe that was unbelievably beautiful could not be refutably termed only as a woman, only as a woman. Every castle embedded with exotically evoking royalty, every castle embedded with exotically evoking royalty may or may not give you the ultimate gratification of your diminutive life, and everything on this universe that was aristocratically splendid, and everything on this universe that was aristocratically splendid could not be refutably termed only as a castle, only as a castle. Every chunk of wood, every chunk of wood floating nonchalantly through water may or may not decay towards corridors of obsolete extinction, and everything on this universe that was opprobriously rotting, opprobriously, and everything on this universe that was opprobriously rotting could not be refutably termed only as a wood, only as wood. Every cow reigning supremely in an entrenchment of divinity may or may not alleviate the lives of neglected urchins, and everything on this universe that was gloriously shining milk could not be refutably termed only as a cow, only as a cow. Every prejudice stinkingly pulverizing its enemies to infinite similash. Every prejudice stinkingly pulverizing its enemies to infinite similash. May or may not swipe civilization from its very roots, and everything on this universe that was turbulently angry could not be refutably termed only as prejudice, could not be refutably termed only as prejudice. Every dog, every dog satanically galloping through the insidiously empty streets may or may not find its robustly juicy bone, and everything on this universe that was diabolically barking, and everything on this universe that was diabolically barking could not be refutably termed only as a dog. Only as a dog. Every terrorist pledging to finish blissful human race like a horde of inconsequential flies, may or may not manifest his cowardly mission into a veritable truth. Every terrorist pledging to finish blissful human race like a horde, every terrorist pledging to finish blissful human race like a horde of inconsequential flies may or may not manifest his cowardly mission into a veritable truth, and everything on this universe that was abhorrent malice could not be refutably termed only as a terrorist, only as a terrorist. Every whisper magnetically caressing the placid winds. Every whisper magnetically caressing the placid winds may or may not weave a tale of sensuously inexplicable compassion, and everything on this universe that was gently diffusing could not be refutably termed only as a whisper, only as a whisper. Every insect irascibly hovering, irascibly hovering around celestial beings may or may not accomplish its task of fomenting irritation, and everything on this universe that pertinently pinches you could not be refutably termed only as an insect, only as an insect. Every game evoking rhapsodic sensations of unprecedented exhilaration may or may not linger in memory for eternal times. and everything on this universe that was joyously interacting could not be refutably termed only as a game. Every cat fretting in frustrating starvation, every cat fretting in frustrating starvation may or may not get a chance to smack its spout with heavenly milk, and everything on this universe that was cleverly awaiting its chance could not be refutably termed only as a cat, only as a cat. Every beggar wailing on the tyrannical streets may or may not appease his gluttony to the epitome of his appeasing contentment, and everything on this universe that was spreading its palms could not be refutably termed only as a beggar. Every kite soaring handsomely in fathomless bits of sky may or may not escalate above the euphoric clouds, above the euphoric clouds, and everything on this universe that was ecstatically flying could not be refutably termed only as a kite, only as a kite. Every bird flapping ravishingly through the boundless skies, through the boundless skies, may or may not be a harbinger of unparalleled peace and divinely brotherhood. And everything on this universe that was wholeheartedly free could not be refutably termed only as bird, only as bird. Every robot every robot fantastically evolved for meticulous perfection, may or may not someday substitute its counterparts of the humankind, and everything on this universe that was mechanically monotonous could not be refutably termed only as robot, only as robot. Every color vivaciously trespassing dazzling spies may or may not seduce you into a cavern of everlasting yearning, and everything on this universe that was vividly contrasting could not be refutably termed only as color, only as color. Every Herculean muscle enveloping tenacious shoulders may or may not surge forward to uplift despondently bereaved humanity, and everything on this universe that was formidably strong could not be refutably termed only as muscle, only as muscle. Every parrot squawking animatedly in its cage may or may not replicate may not replicate its master word for word alike, and everything on this universe that was relentlessly chattering could not be refutably termed only as parrot, only as parrot. Every mother compassionately hugging her child all throughout the day may or may not be able to instill in him the benign ideals of existence. And everything on this universe that was protecting you from disaster could not be refutably termed only as mother. Only as mother. Every gigantically inflated balloon lingering in air may or may not burst when vigorously pecked by the woodpeckers. And everything on this universe that fulminated with a prolific bang, that fulminated and everything on this universe that fulminated with a prolific bang could not be refutably termed only as a balloon. Only as a balloon. Every cloth marvelously woven of exquisite Persian wool, may or may not sequester you from the hideously may not sequester you from the hideously blowing winds of torrential winter. And everything on this universe which was worn all night and die could not be refutably termed only as cloth. Only as cloth. Could not be refutably termed only as cloth. Every gladiator adorned patriotically may or may not snatch triumph for his sacrosanct motherland. May or may not snatch triumph for his sacrosanct motherland. And everything on this universe that was blazingly brave could not be refutably termed only as a gladiator. Only as a gladiator. Every picture woven with thrill and melodramatic excitement. Every picture woven with thrill and melodramatic excitement. Melodramatic excitement may or may not penetrate emphatically through common masses. Every picture woven with thrill and melodramatic excitement may or may not penetrate emphatically through common masses. And everything on this universe that was stupendously entertaining could not be refutably termed only as a picture. Only as a picture. Every pen inundated with gallons of overwhelmingly volatile ink may or may not spin countless lines of fascinatingly sparkling calligraphy. May or may not spin countless lines of fascinatingly sparkling calligraphy. And everything on this universe that was spotlessly written could not be refutably termed only as pen. Only as pen. Every fortress invincibly impregnated with a festoon of scarlet bricks may or may not defend the most mightiest of attacks. And everything on this universe that was towering in unbelievable charisma, could not be refutably termed only as fortress, only as fortress. Every spring, magnificently coiled into intricately glistening folds may or may not bounce back beyond the realms of infinite infinity, may or may not bounce back, may or may not bounce back beyond the realms of infinite infinity, realms of infinite infinity, and everything on this universe that was insurmountably spongy could not be refutably termed only as a spring. Every spring, magnificently coiled into intricately glistening folds, may or may not bounce back beyond the realms of infinite infinity. And everything on this universe that was insurmountably spongy could not be refutably termed only as a spring. Every mirror embedded in oligarchic chicory rosewood may or may not candidly reflect the innermost voice entrapped intensely in the soul. And everything on this universe that explicitly divulges could not be refutably termed as only a mirror. As only a mirror. Every line drawn exotically on seductively simmering soil may or may not reach its ultimate goal, and everything that was pragmatically straight could not be refutably termed as only a line, as only a line. Every amicable lip blending uninhibitedly with all benevolent alike may or may not blossom into an astoundingly tantalizing smile, and everything on this universe that was chortling into wildly desirous guffaws could not be refutably termed only as a lip, only as a lip, only as a lip. Every desert sizzling ruthlessly under the invidiously flaming sun. Every desert sizzling ruthlessly under the invidiously flaming sun may or may not witness the most inconspicuous trace of green in its entire life, and everything on this universe which was just specks of dust could not be refutably termed only as a desert. Every loudspeaker blaring ferociously through the atmosphere may or may not spread its voice to the most remotest corner of this universe. And everything on this universe that was vociferously squealing could not be refutably termed only as a loudspeaker. Only as a loudspeaker. Every swimming pool shimmering under pearly moonlight may, shimmering under pearly moonlight, may or may not entice boisterously bubbling youth in its serenely glistening lap, and everything on this universe that was tepidly blue water, and everything on this universe that was tepidly blue water could not be refutably termed only as a swimming pool, only as a swimming pool. Every skin, every skin glowing in perennial flavor of robust health, may or may not wrinkle profusely with inevitably advancing age, and everything on this universe that was blushing complexion could not be refutably termed only as skin, only as skin. Every curtain, every curtain majestically sprawled across the window may or may not sequester the mansion from each ray of incorrigibly filtering sunlight, may or may not sequester the mansion from each ray of incorrigibly filtering sunlight, from each ray of incorrigibly filtering sunlight, and everything on this universe that was lanky bedspread of cotton wool could not be refutably termed only as a curtain, only as a curtain, could not be refutably termed only as a curtain. Every trophy irrevocably radiating in the sparkle of fascinating success may or may not highlight the epitome of unparalleled success, and everything on this universe that was beautiful triumph could not be refutably termed only as a trophy, only as a trophy. Every afternoon blazing in scorchingly tenacious light, every afternoon blazing in scorchingly tenacious light, may or may not make you abhorrently perspire. Every afternoon blazing in scorchingly tenacious light may or may not make you abhorrently perspire, and everything on this universe that was swelteringly hot could not be refutably termed only as afternoon, only as afternoon. Every blink playfully swiping the territory of the dry eye may or may not granted with the blanket of poignant moisture it badly desired. Every blink playfully swiping, every blink playfully swiping the territory of the dry eye may or may not grant it with the blanket of poignant moisture it badly desired, and everything on this universe that was flickering violently could not be refutably termed only as a blink, and everything on this universe that was flickering violently could not be refutably termed only as a blink, could not be refutably termed only as a blink, only as a blink. Every fossil mysteriously engraved in the chain of century-old rocks, every fossil mysteriously engraved in the chain of century-old rocks may or may not reveal the explicit portrait of its possessor, and everything on this universe that was overwhelmingly scribbled glass could not be refutably termed only as a fossil. Only as a fossil. Every splurge, relentlessly lavishing in glorious ostentation, may or may not end in getting you all the virtues of life that you desired. And everything on this universe that was everything on this universe that was overtly spendthrift could not be refutably termed only as splurge. Only as splurge. Every cross, every cross stringently inscribed on the walls may or may not succeed in delivering in its message of restricting insidious activity. And everything on this universe that was strictly inclement could not be refutably termed only as a cross. And everything on this universe that was strictly inclement could not be refutably termed only as a cross. Could not be refutably termed only as a cross. Every holiday enchantingly basking in the glory of opulent paradise, opulent paradise, may or may not rejuvenate your traumatically brutalized senses. And everything on this universe that was even a trifle free could not be refutably termed only as a holiday. Only as a holiday. Every headache, every headache pertinently pulsating in every cranny of the mind. Every headache pertinently pulsating in every cranny of the mind may or may not devastate you entirely to collapse pathetically on cold ground. May or may not devastate you entirely to collapse pathetically on cold ground. Cold ground. And everything on this universe that was irritatingly paining could not be refutably termed only as headache. Only as headache. Every stomach ravenously thundering in pangs of uncontrollable hunger may or may not consume the unfathomably colossal mountain of food. May or may not consume the unfathomably colossal mountain of food. Of food. And everything on this universe that was provokingly hungry could not be refutably termed only as a stomach. Only as a stomach. Every country unbelievably sprawling may or may not harbor the vivaciously salty seashores. And everything on this universe that was a prolific gathering of individuals, and everything on this universe that was a prolific gathering of individuals could not be refutably termed only as a country. Only as a country. Every mushroom dingily leaping up from dilapidated soil, may or may not savor a place, may or may not savor a place in the menu cards of each grandiloquently flourishing restaurant. And everything on this universe that was button shaped and fleshy could not be refutably termed only as a mushroom, only as a mushroom. Every thought enigmatically, every thought enigmatically wandering through realms of the discovering mind, every thought enigmatically, every thought enigmatically wandering through realms of the discovering mind may or may not culminate into a celestially blooming fantasy. And everything on this universe that was intriguingly baffling could not be refutably termed only as a thought. And everything on this universe that was intriguingly baffling could not be refutably termed only as a thought, only as a thought, could not be refutably termed only as a thought. Every helmet adorned courageously on the head may or may not succeed. Every helmet adorned courageously on the head may or may not succeed in protecting the skull as the mountains crashed down viciously upon it. As the mountains crashed down viciously upon it, and everything on this universe that was shielded, and everything on this universe that was shielded the scalp could not be refutably termed only as a helmet. Every tear that emphatically, every tear that emphatically descended down from the eye may or may not, may or may not reflect, may or may not reflect an island of shivering sadness, may or may not reflect an island of shivering sadness, island of shivering sadness, may or may not reflect an island of shivering sadness. And everything on this universe that was and everything on this universe that was effusively tangy could not be refutably termed only as a tear, only as a tear. Every rabbit, every rabbit philandering, every rabbit philandering through the verdant meadows may or may not escape from the diabolical alligators in the slushy marshes. Every rabbit philandering through the verdant meadows may or may not escape from the diabolical alligators in the slushy marshes. And everything on this universe that was inimitably docile, could not be refutably termed only as a rabbit. And everything on this universe that was inimitably docile could not be refutably termed only as a rabbit, only as a rabbit. Every minute that mechanically sped past the body of the clock, every minute that mechanically sped past the body of the clock may or may not portray the rapidly unfurling essence of time. And everything on this universe that was spectacularly time could not be refutably termed only as a minute, could not be refutably termed only as a minute. Every word compassionately embossed in the gigantic dictionary may or may not trigger chords, may or may not trigger chords of ever augmenting empathy. And everything on this universe that was scribbled by a pen could not be refutably termed only as a word. Every boxer prancing perilously in the ring may or may not inflict a total knockout, may or may not inflict a total knockout of his unsuspecting opponent. And everything on this universe that was puffed glove could not be refutably termed only as a boxer. Every folly committed unwittingly by a human may or may not lead to severely crippling disaster, may or may not lead to severely crippling disaster. And everything on this universe that was incongruously muddled could not be refutably termed only as a folly, only as a folly. Every finger ejecting in marvelous unison from the hands may or may not be able to grip the indispensable, may or may not be able to grip the indispensable threads of existence. And everything on this universe that was an amalgamation of lanky bones could not be refutably termed only as a finger, only as a finger. Every team, every team bonded in the spirit of unbelievable harmony may or may not kiss the crescendo of victory, may or may not kiss the crescendo of victory as it unflinchingly progressed. And everything on this universe that was united together could not be refutably termed only as a team, only as a team. Every pencil extravagantly lead tipped, every pencil extravagantly lead tipped may or may not sketch each intricately fabulous contour of the scarlet landscape. And everything on this universe that was with a tip could not be refutably termed only as a pencil, only as a pencil. Every slang spoken in passionately oriental fashion, every slang spoken in passionately oriental fashion may or may not perpetuate thunderbolts of inevitable attraction. And everything on this universe that was and everything on this and everything on this universe that was supremely stylish could not be refutably termed only as slang, only as slang. Every night dissipating a spell of unmatched desire may or may not incinerate seductive currents down your spine. and everything on this universe that was enthrallingly dark could not be refutably termed only as night, only as night. Every spectacle embedded with meticulously perfect glass may or may not bestow upon you the crystalline vision of your overpowering choice, of your overpowering choice. And everything on this universe that was transparently scintillating could not be refutably termed only as a spectacle, only as a spectacle. Every dragon, every dragon cataclysmically trespassing through the forest. Every dragon cataclysmically trespassing through the forest may or may not succeed in charring the entire wilderness into bedraggled fragments of chowder, and everything on this universe that was breathing fire from its mouth could not be refutably termed only as a dragon, only as a dragon. Every mouth lavishly, every mouth lavishly set amidst the captivating contours of the face. Every mouth lavishly set amidst the captivating contours of the face may or may not utter, the tunes of ultimate reality, and everything on this universe that was foolishly chattering could not be refutably termed only as a mouth, and everything on this universe that was foolishly chattering could not be refutably termed only as a mouth. Every sunbeam, every sunbeam wonderfully sizzling upon mud, every sunbeam wonderfully sizzling upon mud may or may not fumigate its deathly decay, may or may not fumigate its deathly decay with the austere ardor in its flaming demeanor, and everything on this universe that was golden rise could not be refutably termed only as a sun. And everything on this universe that was golden rise could not be refutably termed only as a sun, only as a sun, could not be refutably termed only as a sun. Every noodle dangling pleasantly from the ceiling may or may not be able to incarcerate profuse aliens, may or may not be able to incarcerate profuse aliens in its gregarious swishes, and everything on this universe that was voluptuously pudgy could not be refutably termed only as a noodle, only as a noodle. Every festival religiously followed by countless on the planet may or may not bond, all those murderously sucking blood, may or may not bond all those murderously sucking blood in bonds of eternal love, in bonds of eternal love. in bonds of eternal love, and everything on this universe that was holistically ritualistic could not be refutably termed only as a festival, and everything on this universe that was holistically ritualistic could not be refutably termed only as a festival, only as a festival. Every cactus lingering pompously in the royally shimmering deserts, every cactus lingering pompously in the royally shimmering deserts may or may not penetrate its hostile need, may or may not penetrate its hostile nettles into innocent beings caressing it, and everything on this universe and everything on this universe that was growing from sand could not be refutably termed only as a cactus, only as a cactus. every key articulately every key articulately molded into an intriguing shape may or may not pilfer through the code may or may not pilfer through the code of the dogged lock, and everything on this universe that was intricately slender could not be refutably termed only as a lock. Every paper, when fanatically crushed by the fist, may or may not transform its fragile caricature into a flexible ball, and everything on this universe that was printed by your side could not be refutably termed only as paper. Every worm worthlessly slithering through murderous darkness may or may not radiate emphatically brilliant rays of light, and everything on this universe that was diminutively curvaceous could not be refutably termed only as a worm. Every iceberg lecherously hoodwinking under the nocturnal blanket of stars, hoodwinking under the nocturnal blanket of stars, may or may not emerge triumphant in decimating the colossal ship. Every iceberg lecherously hoodwinking under the nocturnal blanket of stars, may or may not emerge triumphant in decimating the colossal ship, and everything on this universe that was immutably solidified water could not be refutably termed only as an iceberg. Every firecracker raring to thunderously burst may or may not bedazzle every single arena of the cosmos with flaming light, and everything on this universe that was incoherently rambunctious could not be refutably termed only as a firecracker, and everything on this universe that was incoherently rambunctious could not be refutably termed only as a firecracker. And everything on this universe that was incoherently rambunctious could not be irrefutably termed only as a firecracker. Every discotheque sleazily swarming with sanctimonious youngsters may or may not ignite the night with cloudbursts of untamed desire. And everything on this universe that was bombastically cheap could not be refutably termed only as a discotheque. Every panther rebelliously sprinting under pearly rays of moon, may or may not capsize the incredulously succulent prey of its choice, and everything on this universe that was flamingly bellicose could not be refutably termed only as a panther, only as a panther. Every missile shooting violently through innocent carpets of air may or may not strike its desirous range of fixed targets, and everything on this universe that was ricocheting like a lunatic boomerang could not be refutably termed only as a missile. Every automobile speeding like a celestial angel through the romantically panoramic landscapes may or may not catapult you to the realms above eternally enchanting eternity. And everything on this universe that was racing beyond its limits could not be refutably termed only as an automobile, only as an automobile. Every blind man, every blind man, every blind man trespassing across the discordantly bustling street may or may not transcend past it without a single scratch. And everything on this universe that was boundlessly dark could not be refutably termed only as a blind man, only as a blind man. Every butterfly fluttering gloriously, every butterfly fluttering gloriously in blistering sunshine, every butterfly fluttering gloriously in blistering sunshine, may or may not hoist the gaudy, may or may not hoist the gaudy cati, may or may not hoist the gaudy caterpillars of its inherent choice. And everything on this universe that was serenely flapping could not be refutably termed only as a butterfly. Every damsel young and seductively charming may or may not be able to entrap the perfect man of her choice, and everything on this universe that was pristinely bubbling, and everything on this universe that was pristinely bubbling could not be refutably termed only as a damsel, only as a damsel. Every wall, every wall constructed of Herculean strength steel may or may not stagger like a pack of mosquitoes, may or may not stagger like a pack of mosquitoes as the uncouth disaster struck, as the uncouth disaster struck. And everything on this universe that was compactly solid could not be irrefutably termed only as a wall, and everything on this universe that was compactly solid could not be refutably termed only as a wall. Every spice, every spice wavering appetizingly in the atmosphere, every spice wavering appetizingly in the atmosphere around may or may not tingle the taste buds beyond unprecedented capacity. And everything on this universe that was deliciously poignant could not be refutably termed only as spice, only as spice. Every guarantee spoken intractably may or may not manifest itself into a perennially secure reality. And everything on this universe that was an everlasting promise could not be irrefutably termed only as a promise, only as a promise. And everything on this universe that was an everlasting promise could not be refutably termed only as a promise, only as a promise. Every banana skin teasingly huddled on the floor may or may not engender you to dramatically slip, may or may not engender you to dramatically slip. And everything on this universe that made you drip could not be refutably termed only as a banana, only as a banana. Every talent unbelievably lingering in a timid vice age may or may not flower into eclectically supernatural success, may or may not flower into eclectically supernatural success. And everything on this universe that was inherently gifted could not be refutably termed only as a talent, only as a talent. Every zip meticulously riveted to the garment, every zip meticulously riveted to the garment may or may not snugly, may or may not snugly hold it in its position on the flabby waist, may or may not snugly hold it in its position on the flabby waist. And everything on this universe that was a precise juggernaut of steely teeth could not be refutably termed only as a zip, only as a zip. Every bubble rising euphorically in limp air may or may not erupt into a fountain of ecstatic froth. And everything on this universe that was perfectly soapy could not be refutably termed only as a bubble, only as a bubble. Every boomerang carved melodiously out of roasted wood may or may not hurl back towards infinity, may or may not hurl back towards infinity after releasing its loop. And everything on this universe speedily retreating back, and everything on this universe speedily retreating back could not be refutably termed only as a boomerang. And everything on this universe speedily retreating back could not be refutably termed only as a boomerang. Every root deeply embedded, every root deeply embedded in corridors of chocolate brown soil, may or may not withstand the onslaught of the mercilessly whipping storm. And everything on this universe that was coated, and everything on this universe that was coated with grisly mud could not be refutably termed only as a root, could not be refutably termed only as a root, only as a root. Every screw, every screw fantastically engineered, every screw fantastically engineered to unprecedented degrees of perfection, of perfection, every screw fantastically engineered to unprecedented degrees of perfection, may or may not be able to hold the tumble down scaffolding. And everything on this universe that was enveloped with revolving threads could not be refutably termed only as a screw. Every crayon superbly blossoming into a myriad of gorgeously garish color may or may not be able to sketch playfully upon the barren demineer of boundlessly barren canvas. And everything on this universe that was invariably wax-like could not be refutably termed only as a crayon. Every teacher sagaciously imparting the indispensable values of life may or may not form a perpetual rapport with his students. And everything on this universe that was distinguishably bespectacled could not be refutably termed only as a teacher, only as a teacher, could not be refutably termed only as a teacher. Every circus flooded with an incredulous township of acrobatics may or may not bring laughter to the faces of those horrifically deprived. And everything on this universe that was musically entertaining could not be refutably termed only as a circus. Every prison, every prison, every prison savagely torturing the blood-stained criminal for his plethora of misdeeds may or may not be able to keep him for countless more of his lifetimes. And everything on this universe that was morbidly dark could not be refutably termed only as a prison, only as a prison, could not be refutably termed only as a prison. Every traveler, nomadically wandering since the time he was born, every traveler, nomadically wandering since the time he was born, may or may not be able to tread foot on each cranny of this fathomlessly intriguing planet, of this fathomlessly intriguing planet. And everything on this universe that was walking barefoot could not be refutably termed only as a traveler, only as a traveler. Every barber resting like a king in his gloriously plush saloon may or may not scrap the last bit of dirt, may or may not, may or may not scrap the last bit of dirt from his client's hair, from his client's hair. And everything on this universe that was clip-clopping scissors could not be refutably termed only as a barber, only as a barber, could not be refutably termed only as a barber. Every government romping to power after the manipulative elections, after the manipulative elections, may or may not succeed in wholesomely protecting the sacred solidarity of its people. And everything on this universe that was the nerve center of power, and everything on this universe that was the nerve center of power could not be refutably termed only as government, only as government, could not be refutably termed only as government. Every scientist incessantly engulfed in chambers of bubbling test tubes and spacecrafts may or may not discover the gene that could assassinate devil forever. And everything on this universe that was clad in apron and gloves could not be refutably termed only as a scientist. Every train whistling royally through the wilderness of the jungles may or may not impart inexorable exhilaration to its passengers, may or may not impart, may or may not impart inexorable inexorable exhilaration to its passengers seated despondently inside. And everything on this universe that was shrieking and on rails could not be refutably termed only as a train. Every mask fabulously woven in different dimensions may or may not completely conceal the true identity of its dastardly beholder. And everything on this universe that was clandestine, cloistering, could not be refutably termed only as a mask. Could not be irrefutably termed only as a mask. Only as a mask. Every arrow chiseled more lethally sharp than the knife may or may not puncture it, may or may not puncture, may or may not puncture its obsessively focused target. And everything on this universe that was dedicatedly mission oriented could not be refutably termed only as an arrow. Every article laden with eloquently vibrant imagery may or may not reflect the supremely volatile spirit of harmonious survival. And everything on this universe that was a jugglery of rhapsodic words could not be refutably termed only as an article, only as an article, could not be refutably termed only as an article. Every maze severely entangled in complications and enigmatic riddles may or may not lead wholeheartedly to a victorious outlet. And everything on this universe that was profoundly crisscrossed could not be refutably termed only as a maze, only as a maze. Every couple bonded in threads of holy matrimony may or may not immortalize the never dying spirit of love for decades immemorial. And everything on this universe that was intimate togetherness could not be refutably termed only as a couple, only as a couple, could not be refutably termed only as a couple. Every pig disdainfully snoring in the aisles of lackadaisical laziness may or may not lavish, gulping down the pile of ragged rubbish, may or may not lavish, gulping down the pile of ragged rubbish. And everything on this universe that was fetidly dirty could not be refutably termed only as a pig. Every crown zealously jeweled at all quarters may or may not fit the scalp of the timidly feverish prince. And everything on this universe that was stupendously majestic could not be refutably termed only as a crown. Every scar pruriently creeping up on innocent skin may or may not reveal the invidiously hostile disaster that had devilishly engendered it. And everything on this universe that was distortedly ugly could not be irrefutably termed, and everything on this universe that was distortedly ugly could not be irrefutably termed only as a scar. Every adage perennially existing since the earth was created may or may not, since every adage perennially existing since this earth was created may or may not change the tottering complexion of every impoverished life, of every impoverished life, and everything on this universe that was an impactful philosophy could not be irrefutably termed only as a philosophy, could not be irrefutably termed only as a philosophy. Every garage splendidly harboring a battalion of trendy cars may or may not incorporate stealthy cobwebs in its Aztec interiors. And everything on this universe that was collapsible shutters could not be irrefutably termed only as a garage. Every battery prolifically charged all throughout the night may or may not diffuse into light which killed even the most tiniest iota of disgusting darkness. And everything on this universe that was animatedly charged up could not be irrefutably termed only as a battery. Every fork bifurcated into countless blades may or may not be able to hoist the crooked piece of sturgeon sizzling tantalizingly in the chicory plate. And everything on this universe that was bent needles could not be irrefutably termed only as a fork, only as a fork, could not be irrefutably termed only as a fork. Every bull doggedly adorned in robes of satanic red may or may not succeed in uncouthly goring its unsuspecting opponent. And everything on this universe that was intransigently stubborn could not be refutably termed only as a bull. Every coin iridescently clattering in the insatiable aura of its opulence, every coin iridescently clattering in the insatiable aura of its opulence, may or may not bring astonishingly good luck, may or may not bring astonishingly good luck to its cherished beholder. And everything on this universe that was marvelously and everything on this universe that was marvelously glimmering could not be refutably termed only as a coin. Every coin iridescently clattering in the insatiable aura of its opulence may or may not bring astonishingly good luck to its cherished beholder. And everything on this universe that was marvelously glimmering could not be refutably termed only as a coin. Every geyser mechanically controlled, every geyser mechanically controlled with an unbelievable flurry of contemporary contraptions may or may not generate water warm enough to withstand the chilling cold. And everything on this universe that was compassionately warm could not be refutably termed only as a geyser. Every drink glowing a fiery crimson may or may not inebriate its consumer beyond the realms of pragmatic control may or may not inebriate its consumer beyond the realms of pragmatic control, and everything on this universe that was ardently beautiful elixir could not be refutably termed only as a drink. Every cheek radiantly basking in robustly spellbinding health may or may not blush to a profuse crimson when thoroughly embarrassed, and everything on this universe that was emphatically changing color could not be refutably termed only as a cheek, only as a cheek. Every car, every ear dangling in razor sharp precision from the head may or may not be able to catch the most inconspicuously minuscule sound loitering around, and everything on this universe that was somberly flapping could not be refutably termed only as a ear. Every hero galloping in incredible cynosure and popularity may or may not wrap the cord of humanity in impoverished hearts alike, and everything on this universe that was resplendently starry could not be irrefutably termed only as a star, only as a star. Every string resiliently suspended in open space may or may not balance the weight of the monster trying nonchalantly to tread on its slim periphery, and everything on this universe that was very and everything on this universe that was wearily extruding from the lackadaisical rags of barbarically ripped garment could not be refutably termed only as a string, only as a string, could not be refutably termed only as a string. Every organism evolved by omnisciently Almighty Lord, every organism evolved by omnisciently Almighty Lord, by omnisciently Almighty Lord may or may not become a harbinger of humanity in the tenure of its life, and everything on this universe that the eye witnessed could not be refutably termed only as an organism. Every moustache sprouting into a splendidly masculine bush may or may not be able to captivate the heart of the seductively wandering lady, and everything on this universe that was a coalition of fair could not be refutably termed only as a moustache. Every personality having a distinctive aura of its own may or may not achieve the wings of heaven, may or may not achieve the wings of heaven after it emancipated breath and died, and everything on this universe that was charismatically graceful could not be refutably termed only as a personality, only as a personality. Every denim jaded stupendously to a stonewash finish may or may not appease the dynamically plodding youth, and everything on this universe that was substantially faded could not be refutably termed only as denim, only as denim. Every scale, austerely incorporating all nuances of measurement, may or may not be able to measure the absolute pinnacles of the sky, and everything on this universe that was fervently calibrated, and everything on this universe that was fervently calibrated could not be refutably termed only as a scale. Every obsession fanatically inhabiting each ingredient of the blood may or may not thrive amidst the hostile pack of wolves, and everything on this universe that was insanely lunatic could not be refutably termed only as an obsession. Every smell, nostalgically hovering in free space, may or may not incinerate adorably fond memories of existence. And everything on this universe that inadvertently reached the nostrils could not be refutably termed only as smell. Every longing, as ardent as the roar of a lion, may or may not imprison the organism of its choice. And everything on this universe that you immortally dreamt of could not be refutably termed only as longing. Every treasury unimaginably glittering beyond infinite infinity may or may not be able to purchase the happiness it so desired in life. And everything on this universe that was scintillatingly gorgeous luxury could not be refutably termed only as a treasury, only as a treasury. Every cockroach loitering aimlessly around the lavatory seat may or may not choose to frighten innocent beings. And everything on this universe that was pathetically filthy could not be refutably termed only as a cockroach. Every aircraft possessing an oligarchic pair of wings may or may not transport its passengers safely in face of torrentially death storms. And everything on this universe that was frenziedly flying could not be refutably termed only as an aircraft. Every athlete fervently dashing towards the finishing line may or may not wholeheartedly embrace the finishing line. And everything on this universe that was unflinchingly running could not be refutably termed only as an athlete. Every season omnisciently descending upon harmonious civilization, every season omnisciently descending upon harmonious civilization may or may not heal the wounds of uncouthly tyrannizing destiny. And everything on this universe that most synergistically metamorphosed, and everything on this universe that most synergistically metamorphosed its complexion could not irrefutably be termed only as season. Every prodigy catapulting to the summit of unconquerable success may or may not be a benevolent human being. And everything on this universe that was astoundingly proliferating could not be irrefutably termed only as a prodigy. Every novel propelled with an armory of fascinating tales may or may not hold the attention of its reader till the very last page. And everything on this universe that was vibrantly worded could not be refutably termed only as a novel. Every angel that descended from the omnipotent heavens, every angel that descended from the omnipotent heavens may or may not grant you your unrelenting repertoire of boundless wishes. And everything on this universe with silken grace and charm could not be refutably termed only as an angel. Every heart that throbbed an infinite times in passionate chess all across the planet may or may not find the most supreme love of its life. And everything on this universe that fervently beats could not be refutably termed only as a heart. Every soul that wanders frantically across the inexplicably mysterious realms of this gigantic planet may or may not find the peace which it ardently desired. And everything on this universe that is holistically immortal could not be refutably termed only as a soul. Every corpse morbidly rotting towards extinction may or may not contain the impoverished caricature of those dead. And everything on this universe which impoverishedly clatters could not be refutably termed only as a corpse. Every conscience which formed the nerve center of a person's existence, every conscience which formed the nerve center of a person's existence may or may not be perpetually righteous. And everything on this universe that is honest and the innermost could not be refutably termed only as a conscience, only as conscience, could not be refutably termed only as conscience. Every life that transgresses through sweltering cocoons of shimmering sand may or may not be blissfully happy. And everything on this universe that is blooming with unprecedented joy could not be refutably termed only as life. Every life that transgresses through sweltering cocoons of shimmering sand may or may not be blissfully happy. And everything on this universe that is blooming with unprecedented joy could not be refutably termed only as life, could not be refutably termed only as life. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me. From the innermost realm of my soul, I wanted to express my gratitude to your victorious jurisdiction for having so spectacularly patronized my poetry.